Today is July 20th, 2026. My name is Joey Morris. I'm an attorney, and I'm on the Mobile Bar Association Archives and History Committee. And today I'm interviewing Judge Douglas Johnstone on behalf of the Mobile Bar Association's Archives and History Committee. And before we begin, I'd like to formally obtain Judge Johnstone's your permission to have this interview recorded and transcribed so that it can be preserved, edited, and released in whole or part by the Mobile Bar Association for viewing by its members and the public. Do you give me your permission to do this?
Yes.
Great, wonderful. Well, welcome. And I'm looking forward to talking to you because you have led a very interesting life. But let's get some preliminary information done. What is your current age? And I hate to ask.
I'm 84, born November 15th of 1941.
Okay.
So I'll be 85 in just a few months.
Well, perfect, perfect. You look great. You still looks like you're pretty out and about.
Well, I do lots of exercise and eat good food.
Well, that's what you got to do. What year were you admitted to the bar?
1966.
And how long have you practiced law?
Well, it'll be, well, I was admitted, I suppose, in November of 66, so it'll be 60 years this November.
Okay, well, great, congratulations. I'm halfway there. Tell me about your military service. You served in the military, did you not?
Yes, I did.
All right, what year did you go in and where?
Well, I went into ROTC at Rice University.
Mhm.
They had a combat engineer ROTC there, and so that's what I went into. When I graduated from Rice, I also was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army Combat Engineer Corps. I got a delay in active duty so that I could go to law school.
Mhm.
And went to Tulane Law School. While I was in Tulane Law School, the Army promoted me to first lieutenant.
Mhm.
And then after I graduated from Tulane, I wrote the Army and told them I was graduating, but they gave me just a month or so to be admitted to the bar. They did that too, and I was admitted to the bar that year. And then I told them I was ready. So they sent me to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to the Army Engineer School, where I spent 9 weeks.
Mhm.
And then from Fort Belvoir, I was sent to 547th Engineer Battalion in Darmstadt, Germany.
Okay.
Darmstadt is a little bit south of Frankfurt and a little bit north of Heidelberg on the Rhine River.
Mhm.
And at that time, the importance of Germany was in the middle of the war, and Czechoslovakia was, one of the wars. So job was to keep the communists on that side. Well, while I was serving in the Combat Engineer Corps in Germany, I was promoted to captain.
Mhm.
And then my tour of duty ended, and I finished my 2 more years of reserve. I retired as a captain.
All right, what year were you discharged or retired?
Let's see, we discharged in 19 February 13th of 1971. I was discharged because after I got back from active duty, I had to do I got back from active duty in 1969 and had to do 2 more years reserve duty. So that took me up to 71, discharged February 13, 1971.
Okay. And you were practicing law at that time, I take it, by that time?
Yes, in fact, I practiced with the Johnstone Adams firm for a couple of months before I began my active duty, because there was a little lag in the time when I was uh, when I finished law school and got admitted to the bar. And the Army picked me up and started me into active duty. So a couple of months with Johnstone Adams.
And then when you came back,
Then when I came back, I continued with Johnstone Adams until I was elected to the state legislature from House District 104.
Okay.
in November of 1974.
All right.
At that time, I had to withdraw from Johnston Adams because the legislature before that year had passed an ethics act that said that a lawyer legislator had a conflict of interest if any client of his did any business with the state. And at that time, Johnstone Adams was doing business with was representing international people and Coca-Cola company, and all those people, and they had to do business with the state.
I understand. And I want to back up a little bit and get at your family background, your education, and you talked a little bit about that, but where did you grow up and what your parents did?
I grew up principally in Mobile on Dog River, on River Forest Road, Dog River. But shortly after I was born, let's see, born in 1941, November 41. But my father volunteered for active duty in the Army. And he was admitted he was an architect, and he was commissioned immediately as a captain and worked in the Pentagon building as an aide de camp to the general who was the head of materiel for the Army. And during that time, for about 2 years, we lived in Chevy Chase, Maryland, while he was fighting the war in the Pentagon, then moved back to Dog River.
Okay. All right. And were any of you told me your dad was an architect. Did you have any family members that were lawyers?
My uncle, my father's brother, C.A.L. Johnstone Jr., who's seen some of these pictures about here,
Okay.
was a lawyer and called it Big Charlie. He was a lawyer for Merchants Bank and as a National Bank or Coca-Cola, a number of companies like that.
Okay.
And it was his firm that I went to join.
Oh, Johnstone. Okay.
Yeah. One time a man came to sell me just a cold call to sell me insurance. He came and he wanted to talk to Mr. Johnstone. And the receptionist led him back to my office. And he was just marveling. He said, "Mr. Johnstone, you seem so young to have all this around you." And I said, "Hard work and so on." But it was my world.
Well, tell me about, so high school, where'd you go to high school? And then I think you said you went to Rice for undergrad?
That's right. I went to Murphy High School and graduated in 1959. Then I went to Rice University in Houston, Texas. That's in fall of 59. Graduated from there in 1963. Won a scholarship. Well, I won a scholarship to Rice to go there. And then at Rice, I won a scholarship to go to Tulane Law School in New Orleans. So I went to there from 1963 to 1966. But I graduated from Tulane and got it was then an LLB degree, but then the fancy found it, and I sent in $35 in my box top and got a JD degree. That was the beginning of the JD degree.
Okay, all right.
So you really have to call me doctor.
Well, did you have a favorite class or anything that you specialized in law school that you enjoyed?
Well, I had some interesting experiences in law school. When I first got there, the homework, the reading assignments were just staggering. And I didn't know how in the world I was going to do all that reading. Every night they wanted us to go through 150 pages of one thing or another. So I took a speed reading course, and it had to be the world's most primitive speed reading course. It was 2 or 3 weeks, and I would go, and the instructor would hand out these little board-like devices with a ruler that would be driven down the page by a 7 years of a little motor or whatever, and you could set it on whatever speed you
Mhm.
wanted. And they would put reading material of different levels of complexity on that. And you just learn to look at the whole page and read everything through it. And it would just work miracles. By the time I finished that 2 or 3 weeks doing the night reading was nothing. I would blast through it in a couple of hours, and then I'd go around exploring New Orleans, exploring the levees, so
Yeah.
forth. I remember a fun time I had in New Orleans, some really pretty stewardesses. I think they were Delta stewardesses, but I don't recall. But they used to have parties, and they would invite a guitar player named Babe Stovall. Babe Stovall had a guitar that was built exactly like an ordinary acoustic guitar, but it was made of stainless steel. And Babe Stovall could play the most wonderful music on that guitar, and he could play it standing on his head, hanging by his heels from the back of a sofa, lying down, standing up behind his back.
Mhm.
And he was wonderful, and the stewardess all were nice too. I was singing at that time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that was a nice thing about it.
Well, I'm sure New Orleans, you had plenty of opportunities to get out and get out.
Well, the levees were fun. I would take dates on the levee with the gun was full of martini and fly a kite
Mhm.
on the levee. The levees go all the way around. You can watch the boats work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, did any classmates that you recall that came back to Alabama or that you dealt with later in your career?
I have met some Tulane lawyers, but nothing stands out. I didn't have any sort of partnership with them on a lot of cases with them, I guess.
Well, let me talk a little bit about your early legal career. You touched on that. And it says to ask about your experiences looking for your first job, but it sounds like you kind of had an idea what you're going to do.
Yes, I did. When I was a little child, I suppose starting when I was 9 or 10, my mother used to read to me and my older brother, Yerger, for 2 hours a day. And she read adult books. Among the things she read to us were all of Catherine Drinker Bowen's biographies of English history. And one of them was the biography of King Henry VIII, who, with the assistance of his henchman, Thomas Carlyle, managed to behead Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard and one or two others, and bad guy. And I decided that at that time I was going to become president of the United States, and so and cut out the heading of nice wives. And that's what I started aiming toward law school. I started aiming toward law school early on, intending to become president. I never quite made it. Still, I stood for fairness on my career and legislature and the judiciary.
Or in looking for your first job, did you have to look far or since you had your uncle there or?
I wanted to start with him. I liked my Uncle Charlie. And my mentor in that firm was Bob Adams, Robert F. Adams, which was a second in command there. It wouldn't have been proper for me to have my uncle as my mentor. But Bob got me off on to a good start.
Well, how many years were you? That's the only law firm you ever worked at, correct?
That's right. That's right. And a very short period, really, because let's see, I got back from the active duty in the Army in '69 and started working for that law firm. And that work for the law firm was interrupted only by the 8 weeks of summer camp I had to do for the Army for 2 years after that. The rest of the time I was working in defense work there at that firm. And then, as I say, I had to withdraw when I got elected to the legislature. My fort at that firm was pleading. And back then, we had the rules of common law pleading, which I loved. My motto became no good defense should ever degenerate into a mere squabble on the merits. Because you could first file a plea in bar, and then you file a plea in abatement, and then you file a demurrer and so forth. And at that time, the rules of common law pleading were that the pleadings were construed strictly against the pleader. That was so much the case that if somebody was pled an ordinary car wreck case, as they do, and they said that while the defendant, while the plaintiff was driving at or near the intersection on such and such street, the defendant so negligently operated his or her vehicle on the intersection at or near the same intersection on the other street as to cause the wreck. Well, I always argued on tomorrow, if each one was only near, you see, they were alleging at or near, construed most strictly against the pleader. Each one was only near the intersection, and they couldn't collide. In those cases, go out after you refile.
And that has changed tremendously, has it? They're pleading, have they not?
Yeah, the newfangled rules, I still call them the newfangled rules, came in just a few years after I left that firm. Where you can, and it made a huge difference in the practice of law, and I don't know if it's good or not. But under the rules of common law pleading, you could sue one defendant, possibly two, but generally only one. And you could have one theory, possibly two, but just one or two. You had to plead them just right, or even you had to amend it, you were out of court.
Right.
If you didn't get blocked by a plea in abatement or a plea in bar.
Right.
And as a result, the only cases that came along were ones on recognized theories properly pled. Now people can plead any old thing, as many defendants as they can dream up, and in fact they have to, as a matter of defensive plaintiff's work, you have to sue everybody under the sun, can't leave anybody out. Even the plaintiff's lawyer is not under that gun, under common law rules, so you had to pick the best defendant, that was it. But now they sue everybody, and they have all sorts of theories, some of which are valid and some of which are not. And that has caused what we call litigation explosion. There was no litigation explosion when under the rules of common law pleading. The case in the courts always had some to try, but they didn't have scheduled backed way up and so forth.
Right. Well, that, yeah, like I said, it certainly changed. And I think you mentioned it, the type of law that you did was civil defense law.
For my uncle's firm.
Yes.
And then when I had to withdraw from that, I hung out my shingle on at an office building on the Old Show Road that ran behind Bel Air Mall, and specialized in whatever walked through the door.
And this is while you're in the legislature.
Yes. I did civil work, criminal work, everything. And it was good, it was really good to do that. On the one hand, when you do that, you have to invent the wheel with every case. On the other hand, if you're going to be a judge and you've invented the wheel on every kind of case, you've seen it all.
Right.
And I think that's the reason that I kept getting elected and re-elected as judge, because the lawyers would come in and I would understand what they were talking about.
You'd been in their shoes throughout the.
I've been in their shoes plenty of time.
Yeah. Tell me, your office, when you worked for your uncle, where in Mobile was that office?
It was in the Merchants National Bank building on the ninth floor.
Mhm. And then your office, you said, was over behind Beller and Mall,
Mhm.
off Old Shell Road.
It was on the first floor of an office, nice office building there.
What was your, beginning salary at Johnstone?
I don't recall, it was low, but I do remember two things about the money. Um, when I would work on an hourly basis on a fence case, my hourly rate was $25 per hour. I, for an interesting case, came to the firm, with a new client, Fireman's Fund Insurance Company. And they wanted us to represent them in taking over a subsidiary that they'd started here called American Professional, because the subsidiary was collecting the insurance premiums, pocketing them, and not paying the claims. So it was a corporate takeover case. Well, Fireman's Fund was headquartered in San Francisco. And I did some work on the case, and it was good work. They liked it. I sent them a bill, and the House Counsel for Fireman's Fund, a lady named Kathy Thayer, called me up and she says, "Douglas, you're going to have to increase your rate." She said, "My bosses here are not going to take you seriously. Will you please send them a bill for $100 an hour?" I said, "Yes, Kathy, I'm willing to do that." So I did. My other experience with pay was that I one time handled a murder case for $1 an hour. It was an appointed case defending a fellow who was accused of an axe murder up in Citronelle. And I studied up on it a little bit and found out he'd been in Searcy Hospital a couple of times. So I took the deposition on written interrogatories in a criminal case. That was unusual back then, but I told the DA we just have to do it, and he didn't want me to have to take it to court over it. He agreed. So we took the deposition on written interrogatories of Dr. Condon. His name was Jaime Condon. He was the director of Cersei, and he testified, yes, this fellow is just crazy as a loon. He thinks demons are going to come get him. And by the way, the man's head, whose head he split open, was a demon who, in fact, had murdered some other people. So I got a not guilty by reason of insanity ruling in that case, and charged the maximum I could charge because I worked over 100 hours on it. I was paid a dollar per hour, $100.
Goodness, that was the going rate back then for appointed cases?
The appointed cases was $100.
Yeah.
For a murder case. I expect for a lesser than murder case, it was not that much.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about memories of the old courthouse,
Which
the old courthouse.
I enjoyed the old courthouse. Uh, I recall the elevators that were these sort of grate that would close around you. There was a judge down there named Judge Tuart, as I recall, who had a cat named Subpoena. Subpoena would sit on the bench, and Judge Tuart would pat the cat. Whenever somebody got Judge Tuart on the edge, he had a bundle of pencils, and he would hold the bundle of pencils and just push on to calm his nerves. See, well, I have recollection of that. Oh, and I do remember in the old courthouse, we had a wonderful clerk named John Mandible. And we had the deputy clerk, Myrtle Trott. who had a deep gravelly voice because she smoked too much. And there was, her assistant was Catherine Eberline. Those were just wonderful people. I was introduced, when I first was admitted to the bar. My Bob Adams took me down there and introduced me to Mr. Badgeville and Miss Trott and Miss Everline. And told me that he told them I was the nephew of Charlie Johnstone. The next couple of weeks later, I went down there and Catherine said, "Doug, I want you to come in. I want to tell you something." She said, "I know Big Charlie is your uncle, and we love him. We call him Big Charlie because he's so smart and such big cases." But she said, "You had another uncle named Frank Yurko." And she said Frank, he was a very handsome fellow, a bachelor and scandalized people and so forth. She said Frank never had a big case in his whole career. But to him, every client that he had was the biggest, most important client. And he got every single client, no matter how small and humble, the very best result he could be gotten. She said, that's a lot.
Wow. Wow. And that was, he was related to you.
That's what she said. Yeah, Frank Yoder was my mother's brother.
Okay. Okay. Well, this sort of leads into the next question is what people or events had a strong influence on your career path?
Uh, I really, well,
Or really, in the next question is who are your mentors? They're maybe both good.
well, I will say Judge Bowling was, and Judge Hoplander was. Judge Bowling helped me get my political start. He told me his good political friends scattered around the county that I should go meet, and I did that. He was always fair to me when I had cases before him, and I had some really good, interesting cases before him. And Judge Hocklander was a good mentor. He said, "Doug, don't smile in your political pictures because people," he said, "don't frown because people don't like that, but don't smile because people will think you've just stolen their money."
Did you take the advice?
But, I took the advice of both of them in all my political photos. I would do it with a straight, pleasant face, and I would try to think intellectual thoughts. But I was pretty well my own man, throughout my career. I was the District 104 was a blue collar district. It was the Dog River District. I lived on Dog River. My parents had lived on Dog River. And the people on the banks of the river itself were well to do. The people back from the banks of Dog River and in the rest of that district were laborers. And so I knew that I was representing laborers. And I went and visited all the unions and got to know them, got them to vote for me. And on the very first, in the very first 15 minutes of the very first regular session of that legislature, I introduced the agency shop bill, which would have gutted the right to work law. Are you familiar with the right to work law?
Well, I may be, but go ahead and let's get
Yeah,
on.
the right to work law is a sacred cow in Alabama.
Mhm.
Basically, it's to impede the formation and functioning of unions by prohibiting. Although the conservatives say that they're for small government, they like plenty of government to get them out of problems. And the right to work law prohibits an employer from making a labor agreement with a union under which the employees of that particular bargaining unit have to be members of the union. For the agency, and that's not fair because the labor union is required by federal law to represent all employees, whether they're members or not, in grievances and every other labor matter. So they are in effect getting the representation without paying for it. And the agency shop would have allowed contracts whereby non-union members could pay the equivalent of union dues. But I introduced that the very next day. Oh, and the same day, I co-sponsored with Representative Ken Malone a bill to let municipal employees unionize. But you know, Alabama's a non-union state. So, the next day, the Mobile Press Register ran an editorial 18 column inches long saying that I was a heretic, a communist, a traitor to my class, and that I would just be hanging around for the remainder of my term, at which time my political career would end and the county wouldn't be bothered with me anymore. And the editorials from that newspaper kept that tenor in whatever they wrote about me for the entirety of my political career. But every single election except one, attorney my race against Charlie Raddick, who was Attorney General, who was DA there. But in every other election, I carried Mobile County by 70%, 75%.
Yeah,
So the people didn't mind at all.
that's great.
Stuff with them. But anyway, that so much for mentors. Judge Hockland has said, Doug, usually people just go up to the legislature and have good time. Are you sure you want to do all this?
Yeah.
But the legislators, the press corps up there elected me the freshman representative of the term.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Do you remember who you had to run against to get into the legislature?
I had 9 opponents. Among them, Mel Brunson and Delano Palumbi's brother, and there was so many. I don't recall. One was Joe Romano. But there were just a whole slew of them in varying degrees.
You had to go in that runoff, I tell you.
No,
Was the most
no, I won the Democratic primary outright, and then had a Republican opponent and won over him as well.
Who was your Republican opponent?
I think it was Joe Romano. I think he was that one. And he was very popular. He was an ex-policeman who knew everybody, who that just, he was very popular.
Any unusual, extraordinary case or events that you recall from your practice of law?
From my practice, let's see what I have.
There's also the question, do you have any memorable or funny stories from the early days of your career?
Yes, I do. My first civil case for Johnstone Adams was representing the, it was in district court, so you couldn't plead those folks out of court in district court. But the plaintiff was saying that the Merchants Bank wouldn't pay her the money in her account. The defense of the bank was that she had come in and withdrawn it. And they had the signed withdrawal slip where she'd withdrawn all of the money from that bank. So the issue was whether or not the signed withdrawal slip was valid. Well, the expert witness that we called, that we used for the case, was Joe Fisher, who was the bank detective, the detective for Merchants Bank. And I got him on the witness stand. The judge was Judge Brunson, who was blind, couldn't see a thing. His his secretary, Nell Lee, a brilliant, wonderful woman, helped him a lot with his judgment, say retire the chambers, and come out with the judgment. But in any event, I did all the groundwork questions for Joe Fisher. And then I said, now, Mr. Fisher, show you exhibit A, which is the, the withdrawal slip. And I show you exhibits B, C, D, and E, which are samples of the defendant's plaintiff's signature on it. And I'll ask you whether you have an opinion of whether they're the same or whether they're not the same. And Joe sits back in the chair and opens his briefcase and he pulled out this huge magnifying glass. It must have been 8 or 10 inches across and quite a thick thing. And he begins studying all these things, which of course he looked at 100 times before. But he's sitting there in court before Judge Brunson studying these things. It was too good for me to miss. And so I said, let the record show that Mr. Fisher is examining these signatures under a huge magnifying glass. And Judge Brunson went like that, and Nell smiled. But after a while, Joe ponderously said, yes, Mr. Johnstone, I do have an opinion. And what is that opinion? In my opinion, Mr. Johnstone, these signatures are one and the same. That was my first civil case.
Your first civil case.
First civil case.
You got any cases that you can think of you wish you had not been a part of?
No, I enjoyed all my cases, all variety. I will, this question about cases or events from my practice, this is really set up to interview lawyers, not so much for judges. But there were 2 cases on the Alabama Supreme Court that I figured into that I thought were very, very important. One of them is the case of ex parte Lucas, ex parte Lee and Lucas. That's 792 Southern 2nd, 1169, Alabama 2000. It was a pitiful, sad case because Leanne Lucas lived with a boyfriend. They had a baby together, and the boyfriend, in a drunken rage, one night beat the baby horribly, beat the baby. And Leanne Lucas was so traumatized by it, instead of taking the baby immediately to the hospital, she sat there quivering, shivering, and not knowing what to do for about 7 hours before she took the baby to the hospital. The baby got to the hospital and there was nothing they could do. The boyfriend and beat the baby so hard that the little baby was doomed to die, and he did in fact die. Both of them were charged with capital murder. The counts against both of them were that each one had beaten the baby to death. And the second count, which was against her alone, was under a particular provision, statutory provision of our criminal law, that she had killed the baby by failing to take it to the hospital in time for it to be saved. Well, the jury convicted the boyfriend of beating the baby to death, and the judge sentenced the boyfriend to death. The jury acquitted Miss Lucas of beating the baby to death. They acquitted her, but they found her guilty of capital murder by failing to take the baby to the hospital in time. And the judge sentenced her to life without parole. Jeff Dean's case, Jeff Dean brought it up to the Supreme Court, and I got the case. And Jeff argued that the hospital had, that the state had failed to prove causation, and the state had failed to prove causation. In other words, that the delay was what killed the baby. Um, the Court of Criminal Appeals obsessed with her duty and her breach of duty, her duty to take the baby promptly to the hospital and her failure to do that. And they just kind of glossed over the causation issue. But the Alabama state statutory law specifically says that the state has to prove causation. Well, I wrote the case saying that there was no proof of causation for the Supreme Court, and I went into our first conference. We would circulate case opinions, proposed opinions ahead of time, and the judges would cast preliminary votes. I went into conference with me being the only one who wanted this case reversed because of failure of proof of causation, not one other judge. And I explained to them the statute requiring causation and that the evidence proved horrible injuries to the baby, but there was no proof at all that taken really fast would have saved the baby. And the next conference, I had one more vote, but I think that's only one. So I rewrote the case and I likened it to a malpractice case. And I said, suppose this baby had been brought in immediately, but the emergency room doctor had stayed back in the coffee room regaling the nurses with jokes and so forth until the baby died. Suppose he were then sued for malpractice in allowing the baby to die. You know this case would be reversed because there would have to be proof that he could have saved the baby, that medical care could have saved the baby. And I guess I picked up everybody's vote, and then a couple of them fell off, but ended up with a court of 7 judges who agreed. That case was important because it stands for the proposition that you can't just kind of finesse causation in a criminal case. There was another case that haunted me, and it was Ex parte Farmers Exchange Bank in Ray Cole versus Farmers Exchange Bank, 783 Southern 2nd 24, Alabama 2000. In that case, Ms. Cole wanted to buy a house, and she wanted to borrow the money to buy the house from Farmers Exchange Bank. A Farmers Exchange Bank, according to the banking rules, was required to get a termite report on the house. But Farmers Exchange really wanted to make this loan because they wanted the interest, but they had to get a termite report. Well, they did get a termite report. The termite report consisted of 2 pages. The first page was just the fact page of the location of the house and the lender and the borrower and all that sort of thing. The second page of the report said that the house was infested with termites, so infested that it wouldn't be a house much longer. Farmers Exchange Bank at the closing gave Ms. Cole the first page, but not the second. They said, here's your termite report, dated first page. So she went out and closed. She borrowed the money from them, closed the loan, and 2 weeks later she fell through the kitchen floor and sued the bank for fraudulent concealment. Justice Houston wrote the majority opinion and said that it was an arm's length dealing. That a loan by a bank to a borrower is nothing but an arm's length dealing, that the bank had no duty to disclose anything unless she specifically asked about what it was. And she hadn't specifically asked. But there is a section in the Alabama Code, the fraud sections, the fraud chapter, that says that the circumstances can raise a duty where no duty was before. And that they're given here the first page, raise the duty given the second page. I couldn't get a quote on that. Justice Cook agreed with me, and Justice Kennedy agreed with me. All the rest of them, Houston and Maddox and Perry Hooper, just the rest of the court, and never could get a court, and I never could get enough to reverse that. And I realize that that's just the nature of being an appellate judge, that there are some cases where you really feel there's been an injustice and there's no way out of it. It takes 5 votes. And that's the difference between being a trial court judge who never suffers injustice. He can always do what he thinks is fair. I can call the lawyers back and say, look, I made a mistake yesterday. Let's get it straight today. But on an appellate court, it takes 5 votes. And that case haunts me to this day.
No, me too.
Yeah, well, she couldn't afford another house. She had to pay that loan back. And she had a lot of termites, nothing but termite wood.
Which, question here, which judges stand out in your memory as the best or toughest or fairest or most unreasonable that you were in front of?
In the circuit court, Judge Bowling stands out as a wonderful judge, absolutely fair in civil cases, not affected by who's big guys, who's little guys. Absolutely fair in criminal cases. I was impressed with him. There were other judges who were good too, and I was impressed with Judge Bowling. On the Supreme Court, Justice Ralph Cook was a wonderful justice. Absolutely fair in every case, paid strict attention to exactly what was being written. He wanted it written right. And his defeat was a very sad thing. When he came up for re-election, which was while I was on the Supreme Court, Lynn Stewart of Baldwin County ran against him. And her winning video that she showed again and again on television said that while she was a district judge in Baldwin County, said that while she was district judge in Baldwin County, she had the highest rate of convictions in DUI cases of any judge in the state. And DUI was such a big issue at that time that impressed people who were not thoughtful. But for a judge who tries bench trials and controls the outcome to convict everybody except the judge's friends and whomever is certainly no credential. But on that basis, she defeated Judge Cook. He was gone. He went to practice law with a Hare Wind firm and had a great time. But they missed him on court. Another judge who almost always voted differently, another justice almost always voted differently from me, but I thought he was wonderful, was Judge C. The good thing about Judge C was that he would write every case with absolute honesty. He would not overlook any operative fact. he made sure that every operative fact, every fact that would make a difference for one side, every fact that would make a difference to the other side was in that opinion and as part of the facts. And then he would say, now there are two ways we can go on this. There's way A and there's way B. Well, he usually chose way A. And I would say, I respect him to say, I choose way B. But that was a wonderful thing because there were other justices who would select what operative facts they would include and which ones they would admit in order to support an unfair principle of law coming out of the case.
Mhm. Do you have an opinion? I imagine you do, as to whether judges should run under a party platform?
It's a shame. Yeah, it should be nonpartisan. It's so difficult, but sure, it's just absurd to make it a
Mhm.
but and yet, I think it's good to elect them. The appointed system is just as subject to being tilted as the elected system, more subject to being tilted up on the national level, whenever the United States Senate is choosing a Supreme Court, any judge, they want a shield for a given position. Right now, the emphasis is on getting anti-abortion shields.
Mhm.
But in or anti-gun control shield, they want them
Mhm.
so it's just as corrupt to appoint them,
Mhm.
just as subject. I was impressed with the way, well, I have been impressed with the way a lot of the justices have handled those questions. Just by saying, well, I can't decide the case until I hear it. Of course, that's true.
Mhm.
But here in Alabama, I was appointed before I was elected. I was got myself on the among the three with the Judicial Selection Commission for my first district judgeship, but then had to be chosen by Governor Wallace.
Mhm.
And then the next year, when there was a vacancy and Judge Hardman retired, I got myself on Mobile County Judicial Commission recommendation list of three that had to be appointed again by Governor Wallace. But politicking those members of the committee and politicking Governor Wallace is committed, is recommended rather with the Judicial Selection Commission. You know, everybody's encouraged to tell each commissioner what he or she thinks. So I had hundreds of people that said good things about me. Even the parents of my ex-wife said he was a great man. Go ahead and appoint him when I was up for district judge and circuit judge. One of the commissioners, Judge Sarby, said, well, when your parents-in-law, your divorced wife recommends you, you take that pretty seriously. But anyway, and with Governor Wallace, one of the stories in that little book is that one of my then sweetheart's best friends was the wife of the governor's doctor. And when after Governor Wallace, of course, I had lots of people getting talking to Governor Wallace for me. But Governor Wallace said, when I went up and thanked him for appointing me, judge, he said, well, no, I had to. My doctor, Dr. Kierans, was giving me a digital rectal exam, and he told me to pick Dr. Johnstone. I had to appoint you.
That's in your book.
That's
That's good. That's good. Here's a question here. Which lawyer, man, I won't say, did you least enjoy working with? And what were your best and worst adversaries?
I really, I liked all of them. I liked all the lawyers. I had a grand time. I loved the bar.
Good, good. How has the practice of law most changed since you started your career?
Um, uh, well, there've been two things. The change to the newfangled rules that I talked to you about, the I call them newfangled and now half a century old, but the change to the fact pleading, as they call has caused a litigation explosion. And the other bad thing is the explosion of laws themselves. Back when I started practice, a person could theoretically love the law. Um, the federal criminal laws would fit in one volume of federal statutes. The state laws, although they took up more than one volume, did not result in packing the penitentiaries with criminal defendants. But over time, and especially since redistricting, when the legislature lost so many of its lawyers, when lawyers ceased to be a controlling factor in the legislature has just gone nuts with criminal laws. And as a result, the penitentiaries are packed beyond whatever they can afford, they can hold. And the federal laws. And I think a book was written named Three Felonies a Day. I've forgotten the name of the author, but Justice Gorsuch frequently cites that book with approval. But the author points out that in federal law, there are at least 50,000 criminal laws, and they do not require mens rea, just the mere technical violation of a federal criminal law go to the penitentiary. Whether it's the way you design a medical device, whether it's the way you market the medical device, whether it's the way you pay for your wall. I'll give you an example. I built a wall, quite a nice wall, down at my house. The cost that I agreed on with my contractor was $27,000. The work wasn't stacked up where more would be due in one month than another. It was just regular work. The logical way to pay that was $9,000 on three different occasions. Had I done that, I would have been indicted for a money laundering, because one of the statutes says that if you dance around the total price, if you pay it in installments that indicate on their face that you're avoiding the $10,000 reporting rule, that you're guilty of money laundering. That's the kind of thing every American has to fear every day. And that is a bad thing that's developed since I started practicing law. The explosion of federal civil and criminal laws, especially criminal law, with no requirement for mens rea whatsoever, and the explosion of foolish laws in the state legislature passed by people who cannot and do not bother to read the bills. If they were to read a bill, they wouldn't understand what terms like what ordinary everyday activities are encompassed within the legal language within that bill. So they don't bother with it. They just vote on whether or not they think it's going to be popular, or whether it'll ingratiate them with the other side or whatever.
Right, right. And I want to just so we have a good order, because you've talked about some of the different things you had done besides a lawyer. You've been a legislature, and I want to make sure we got the years right on that. You're a House of Rep, or State Rep, 74 to 78.
That's right.
and then you got appointed to be a district court judge 84 to 85.
That's right,
And then you got appointed to be circuit judge
in
at
'85.
85 and came off the bench in 98.
No, I came off the bench after, when I took office as Supreme Court Justice in January of 1999.
Okay.
That was the termination of my circuit court experience. In fact, I recall trying a case that December, early December '98. And I ruled one way, and the lawyer said, "Gosh, Judge, I wish you hadn't ruled that way." And I said, "Well, I'll take another look at it 2 months from now."
That's good. And then, so you were on the Supreme Court from 1999 till
It's the end of, past the end of 2005, till the beginning of January 2006 was the end of my secure term.
of the three judgeships you had, which one did you most enjoy?
Uh, I suppose, I liked a lot of things about being circuit judge because I loved seeing my friends. I loved to be walking through the smoky hallways of the old courthouse and seeing everybody outside. I loved lawyers coming in for motion docket, so forth, seeing them. And I liked being able to make sure that every case was decided as fairly as I could. And I recall times when I had my secretary call up lawyers in an evening after court is adjourned and telling them the judge says he thinks he made a mistake earlier today and make sure to come in tomorrow. Let's get it straightened out. And you can do that as soon as you can't get that.
Any extracurricular illegal activities have been important to you?
Yes, yes, when I left the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court appointed me to the Alabama Pattern Jury Instruction Committee for civil jury instructions. And people have no idea the importance of that committee. The legislature can adopt statutes until it's blue in the face. The appellate courts can hand down precedents until they're blue in the face. The jury doesn't know any of those things. The jury doesn't know any law except what the judge tells them. And in civil law, in a civil case, the judge tells them what the pattern jury instruction book says for the most part.
Right.
It's as close to the deep state as you'll find. And for that reason, the Supreme Court was very careful back in my day to pick senior lawyers and senior judges who could be trusted not to slant the jury instructions so they fit that particular lawyer's practice or philosophy or that particular judge's philosophy. I did that for 15 years. I served on that committee from the end of 2005 until 2020, 2021, something like that. The other thing I enjoyed extracurricular was Inns of Court. I was one of the first members of the Mobile Inn of Court, and I just love that. I love seeing the other lawyers, old and young.
Mhm. Have you been involved in any local, state, or national politics?
Well, state politics and local, you had to because every office I've ever held was an elected office.
Right. How would you describe your work habits?
Compulsive. Certainly on the Supreme Court, I worked every day, Saturdays, Sundays, Thanksgiving, Christmas every day. Because toward the end, I was, not that party should make any difference, but in a way, it did make a difference in how you view the law. I was the only Democrat on the court. And the others were making hay while the sun shined. They were changing the law, for instance, the justifiable lives law and fraud cases and so forth. They were, the newspaper loved to call them conservative, but I would joke with them, what in the world are you conservative? When you reverse precedent after precedent after precedent. So on Christmas Day, I was irritated because I couldn't get my staff to I would phone things up to them and then put them on the computer and fax them and that sort of thing. But I'll sit down in the Supreme Court. I was just compulsive at work, and I was awfully careful with my trial court judges. My when I would sit as district judge, my dockets would usually last a little bit longer than the others because I was making sure I got all the facts on that and made a judgment.
What does it mean for you to be a lawyer?
Um, the I made myself some. The first lawyers, devil's advocate, and I think that's a wonderful thing about the American system. In Mobile, to me, the best example of a wonderful devil's advocate is David Barnett. David can have a client who had one leg in the window and one leg out of the window. And David finds a way to defend him and does the very best he can. And it's just wonderful that no matter if everybody on the planet is against the defendant in America, somebody represents it. Also, I think that a lawyer is a guide through the wilderness of laws. And as we've discussed earlier, the wilderness becomes a worse and worse wilderness, more and more laws that people are presumed to know. That's perfectly absurd to presume that everybody knows the 50,000 federal crimes and the crimes that the legislature adopts every single session. But you're presumed to know that, and the lawyer can sometimes help people through that wilderness and keep them out of trouble.
Any advice for young lawyers starting to practice the law?
Well, they really, a lawyer, in order to be a lawyer, has to want to serve other people. There's no point in being a lawyer if you don't want to serve other people and make them better off one way or another. And you may be a business lawyer and you may want them to succeed in their business, but your whole heart has to be helping them succeed in their business. Or you may be a criminal lawyer and you want the very best you can get, but you've got to go into it knowing that it's a service to other people's job, nothing else. And in my opinion, it's best for lawyers to have an interest in people who are underserved. The rich and powerful folks generally get along pretty well. And they're just most of America's millions of people who nobody takes care of, nobody looks out for.
True. Are you familiar with ChatGPT?
Yes, I am, but I don't use it much, but I've gotten where I use, Google AI all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just marvelous.
So it's amazing. You have to obviously be careful on the legal side when you want to make sure you don't get in trouble with the court and use it to write a brief,
Well,
but
I'll tell you what I do.
yeah.
On these two cases I just said, I want to make sure, well, actually on these two, I have them in my house because I have all the writers from the Supreme Court. But I will use AI to get the citation, and then I use the Bar Association's
Yeah.
free service and read the case.
So I doing a little research, getting ready today. I Googled you and then I said, well, let's go to Chat GPT and see what it says. And it came to the section of how lawyers viewed you. So you know what it said?
No,
Here's what ChatGPT said how lawyers viewed you. Extremely well prepared, respectful to lawyers on both sides, independent in his analysis rather than predictably voting for plaintiffs or defendants, particularly knowledgeable about trial practice because he served for many years as a Mobile County Circuit Judge before joining the Supreme Court. It's pretty good stuff.
that's awfully nice.
That's pretty. There's more detail, but I thought that was really good. I thought that was, and that matches everything I've heard,
Well,
so.
I'm touched by that.
Let's just switch. We're almost done here, and we just want to get on to some of the personal stuff. Do you have children? Are you married? What?
I was married, but I got divorced, 6 years after I got married, which I think was the average time for a marriage back then. Of that marriage, there was one child. My son, Inge Johnstone, is really Francis Inge Johnstone, who's a lawyer up in Berkeley.
Mhm.
He's exactly 30 years younger than I am, which means right now he's 54 years old. He represents people whose insurance companies won't pay off on a policy. And then I have a 10-year-old son named Skyler in the Philippine Islands, by my permanent sweetheart there. Skyler was 10. He's an American citizen because I'm an American citizen. I had to go through quite a rigmarole at the American Embassy in order to achieve that.
Right.
They're very particular. They require a DNA test under their personal supervision.
No.
But anyway, he's a scholar, is a beautiful, brilliant kid, gregarious, lots of friends, a lot of fun.
Great. That's great. But any other activities outside the practice of law which you enjoy or that are important to you?
Yes, I've loved water sports, and I've done them all. Um, I'm good at snorkeling. I can scuba dive. I'm am good at sailing. I grew up with sailboats. And then when I got into the more active things, I learned how to windsurf. And the latest thing I have learned to do in water sports is kiteboard.
Impressive, really.
And I would kiteboard down, I learned in Cabarete in the Dominican Republic. I had been to a beautiful beachfront restaurant there. And while I was eating my delicious lunch, was looking at these kiteboarders, and you saw the like 50 or 60 of these big sails causing these people to zoom across the water. Wondered how in the world did they not learning each other, but I decided I had to learn. So I did learn. And I went to the Dominican Republic a number of times during that, and then developed a circle of kiteboard friends who one year said, "Well, the wind's going to die here, but it's picking up in Brazil. So come on down to Brazil with us." Well, I had to get a special visa to go to Brazil at that time. So I did. I got a 5-year visa, and my purpose that I had to cite to the Brazilian government was I wanted to brush up on my Portuguese and learn the kiteboard. So I went down there, and and learned I went to a place called Cabarete. No, not Cabarete, Cambuco, on the northeast coast of Brazil. Unfortunately, the northeast coast of Brazil is the southwest coast of the Atlantic Ocean.
Mm.
And on the one hand, the wind is wonderful there. It whips along between 18 and 25 knots all day long, parallel to the shore, which is good for people who are amateurs.
Mm.
The other side of the coin is the water, the waves are huge and they're absolutely opaque with mud because it's so turbulent.
Mhm.
So I would have to take deep breaths to go out and get started. I was so old at that time when Brazilian kids, when the Brazilian kids come out there and help you set up and get your lines straight and so forth. And they love to do that, especially if you give them half a real or something. And they would, when I would get up and start going, they'd say, oh, pie, meaning the papa.
You got a nickname, nice,
Yes.
nice.
So,
What,
and
what,
fly, I fly airplanes.
oh, really?
I built two home built airplanes and flown both of them. So
That's amazing,
yeah.
goodness. What are your thoughts on how to best achieve a successful work-life balance?
Uh, well, the way I handle everything when I get all stressed out is exercise.
Mhm.
And I have vigorous um, hard exercise. I have a high bar at home, but I can still do acrobatics on it. I lift weights and things like that. So if I get really stressed out, worried about something, if I start my exercise routine, then I can, it's good for me. And I can kind of get other things in perspective. I also perfect diet, perfect food, and right amount of protein, right amount of vegetable. Don't drink much.
Mhm.
Not sanctimonious about it, it's just not very care.
I understand. Last question. If you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Nothing really. I do the best I could.
Judge, it has been a treat. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Very kind.
Yes, sir.